Hey guys, what's up? It's LeBlue here again. This week we're going to be kind of doing a bit of a review of the Monk as a class, or more so as a tank, for this expansion. Blizzard has come out and said that the Warlords of Draenor beta will be soon, TM. So hopefully we see it in the next week or so, or at least have a date for this, as we're getting to that point where if it's another 6-month beta like MOP was, it will be in July or August even at this point, depending when it starts, and we have the new PvP season. So I figured right now would be a pretty good time before all the news for the expansion starts kind of flowing out to start maybe talk about some of the things as the monk class, kind of a review of the class in Mr. Pateri, at least from my point of view. And again, I'm focusing more on as a tank, from a tanking perspective. So back in the earlier expansions, specifically Wrath of the Lich King and Cataclysm before the Monk, Death Knights were the only really active mitigation tanks, and the Monk's model was sort of based off this in that you were doing more than AFKing at your keyboard and mashing Sunder armor or whatnot. Back when threat was more of a thing, but that was really all you had in control of your cooldowns, other than, oh, shield blocks up, push it, okay. Oh, there's this one ability, I need to push shield. Basically, they moved from abilities that bosses had based to make sure that you were awake, and just a cooldown you pushed whenever it was up, because your tank reduced damage to yourself. Yay. The Monk has kind of taken the active mitigation style of Death Knights, which you could almost now say as a reactive mitigation style versus active. But it's really kind of expanded on it to where you hold a lot of your mitigation and control, and I feel it's been a very successful project of the Monk. There's places where it could be a little bit better, obviously. I'll kind of get into that as we go on. But overall, I would say is incredibly successful, and we've seen some of the other tanks begin to adopt very similar things to their model, to where generating resources and whatnot so that they can actually put towards active mitigation, as well as having your AFK check. Is shuffle up? Good, you're not AFK. Okay, are you using Elusive Brew properly? Okay, good, you know what you're doing. Oh, there's a mechanic that needs you to use Elusive Brew or guard at a specific time. Awesome. Here's some small cooldowns. Here's a large cooldown. It's really, as a class, as a spec, it's been very solid so far as tanking. Next, looking at your talents as a monk. The movement area, really great. Love the first tier. It's almost, you can pick whatever and you'll be fine. Obviously situations where you might want to take Tiger's Lust because it allows you to give your raid members a speed boost. You might want to take Celerity because you need more frequent bursts of movement for kiting. And Celerity obviously ties into Chi Torpedo very well. I will get into that later. Your next tier is the Chi moves. Chi Burst has a niche in some fights if you need AoE, but Chi Wave has definitely been our go-to. I'd like to see Zen Sphere get better. And part of the problem is it munches a lot of globals for not terribly crazy great effects. Like Mistweavers can use it for damage, but for a Brewmaster, it just doesn't really have a place, and the damage it does isn't that great relative to a Chi Wave or even a Chi Burst, and just doesn't really have its own niche per se. The next set of talents are Energy, Chi Gen, or whatnot. The Ascension's kind of been our go-to once it got buffed. Before that, it was Power Strikes. Power Strikes, there's still an argument for it at lower gear levels. If I remember correctly, there is a point, it is actually better for Chi generation up until some ludicrous haste point that you don't really want to gear for as a tank. But it's generally preferred for Ascension because you can actually get away with incredibly low levels of haste with or without Ascension. It just gives you more buffer, but Ascension generally just feels smoother and lets you bank that extra Chi, which can be used for a Purify without really messing up things for a Blackout Kick. Chi Brew for Brewmasters, unlike our Windwalker and Mistweaver brethren, very lackluster. And it's more so, a lot of it has to do with how much gear we have right now, because we've gotten to the point where our Elusive Brew generation is extremely consistent, and it doesn't really take a whole lot to hit 15 stacks nowadays. You're going to hit it pretty easily, so that part of it's kind of devalued. And then the only time a Brewmaster is truly vulnerable is if it hasn't been tanking for a while, and that generally, or it's just the fight starting. and that's literally just a keg smash and a blackout kick away. Keep in mind that that most vulnerable period, which is right when the fight starts, is generally when the healers have 100% mana, and you're pretty much the only thing to heal anyway. You're not really in any danger at that point. So I'd like to see Chi Brew maybe made a bit more attractive for Brewmasters, whether that's increasing the amount of Chi or reducing the cooldown from the Chi that you get while keeping the 2 charges, just to make it so that there's more reward for it, but without obviously overshadowing the other 2, because I do like the choice there. Your next set of talents is your CC, we'll call it the CC tier. Really awesome tier. Also like this one, same reasons as our very first tier. Because you have choices of flavors. They all have their purpose, whether you want to disarm, do you want a range stun, do you want a close range stun, it's a bit longer but you have to be pretty in melee range, or do you want an AoE silence and disarm. All 3 of these have had their uses. I'm very happy with this tier as well. Maybe, but this is like an encounter thing, maybe have Ring of Peace have a few more places, but there have been fights or situations where it's been a really great. Really happy with this overall. Next tier is your defensive cooldowns and whatnot. Healing elixirs for the most part this expansion up until Siege has been like the unwanted child, the redheaded stepchild of that. This tier it kind of came out and shined because there are a lot of situations where a guard would cover what diffuse magic or even dampen harm would normally kind of fit into. And how they have it set up now, we use either Purifying Brew or Elusive Brew enough to where it actually procs pretty often, and considering that it will not heal you if you're at 100%, this also decreases the amount of overheal that you'll be seeing from this, which then makes it a very solid survival increase if there's no real reason to take Diffuse Magic or Dampen Harm. Again, solid tier, gives great choices, and then you can go on from there. And then our final tier, you have your Xuen, you have your Chi Torpedo, and you have Rushing Jade Wind. For Brewmasters, Rushing Jade Wind and Xuen have had amazing opportunities for both of them here. Very solid 2 talents, both different ways, and even on talents where you could take one or the other, you can often make an argument for the other one if you're not looking to do more damage overall, but if you're acting more to focus your damage. Gallicrass being a wonderful example. Rushing Jade Wind will do more damage overall through the fight because of the adds. However, if there's a particular packs because of how they're spaced out you're having trouble with, or even if Gallicrass damage is your problem, you take Xuen for the extra damage because he will do more focused damage. But if that's not a problem, Rushing Jade Wind is where you want to go. I'm happy with those 2. As a tank, Chi Torpedo not so happy. Mistweavers can abuse it. Windwalkers, so far as I know, stay the hell away from it as well. But as a Brewmaster, very not happy with this talent, just because the sacrifice of mobility for the healing and damage, that's not terribly useful. And if you use it to go through mobs, if you're actively tanking them, you just now turned your back to whatever is punching you in the face, and now it's punching you in the back, and you can't mitigate damage through dodging and parrying. So it puts you in a really bad situation. As 25 man, it does have a use to help kiting. But it kind of leads into, I don't like it because it hurts our mobility. It also pigeonholes you into taking Celerity as a talent, and that takes away a choice from an otherwise really solid tier. I'm really kind of hoping to see some sort of rework with this, if not replacing it entirely. Really cool concept, but it feels super situational, and it just doesn't feel too great for Brewmaster. Obviously, I understand it's really hard to balance one to be attractive for all 3 specs, and we do have 2 that we already kind of switched between anyway, so maybe that's fine. But if there is a way to kind of improve on it to where it doesn't actually take away our mobility for something else, I think that would be really awesome. Next up, I'm going to go into glyphs a little bit. I like Glyph of Guard. I think that's an amazing concept. It's an amazing idea. I have this situation and I want to be better for it, but I am giving up something else. I can't absorb physical damage now, but it's better for spell damage, so I can more target where that defense is going. Great example, and the video you'll see here behind me, is Siegecrafter Black Fuse. I wanted to only soak these electrostatic debuffs, nothing else, because otherwise the purpose of it is kind of lost. That glyph is great for that. However, I don't want to use it on a fight where there's a lot of physical damage. Nazgrim, having that glyph, entirely a waste of slot, and I take a cooldown away from myself for the executes. So I think it's awesome. It has its place, and there's great things you can do with this glyph, and as well as there's a bit of factor of you're not just put glyph, go to sleep because you're done. There's some thought process behind it. I also like situational glyphs, kind of like Breath of Fire glyph. That's a pretty cool one because I've used that in the past for certain things, specifically Heroic Megara. I wish I could have used it more this tier, but there wasn't really anything for it. But I don't like glyphs so much. Like Enduring Healing Spheres, I feel like that's something that should be more fixed with the class, less so thing you should glyph for to have really long spheres, because the shortening of the length of that was kind of a band-aid fix to Mistweaver Mastery that didn't really pan out too hot, and it kind of carried over into their specs. I like having these longer orbs. I don't care particularly for glyphing for it, even if we don't have too many great glyph options anyway. And I kind of like to see that you made more baseline, maybe weaken the glyph and increase the duration. But that said, they're probably not going to do that if they intend to keep the explosion part of it. Just kind of a wish thing. Fortuitous Sphere is kind of another glyph I'm kind of looking at. I was like, I'll take it because I can. There's not a lot of really great glyphs or super situational glyphs that we get to play with a lot. Zen Med's another one I kind of look at, and every so often I'll take, because now it's a dispersion you can move with now instead of a dispersion you have to sit there and are rooted. And I mean, I think Zen Med you should be able to move as it is. I don't think you should have to glyph for that. It kind of sucks, and I feel like that takes away from part of the utility of the spell. But that's kind of how it is. And the very last thing I want to kind of touch on is with the beta coming out. Obviously, we're going to get a lot of changes and stuff. We're going to see a lot of system things and balancing and all that good happy stuff. And I kind of have a little bit of a wish list or of things I'm kind of looking for. The first up is the level 100 talents. I really hope that none of those were final. The only one I looked at and was kind of like, yeah, that'd be really good. That was the Vital Mists, I believe, from memory. And that was the talent that lets you stagger some magic damage. I feel like that would generally be your go-to ability. I didn't really care so much for the other two, especially gives you regenerate chi for 10 seconds or replenish whatever you lose. Like, as a DPS cooldown, it sounds okay, but really it's just building up a ton of Goth Shuffle for really no real great reason, because you're already going to have more than you can handle as the fight goes on. It okay for the start of the fight, kind of like Chi Brew, but it doesn't really have too much value. And plus, Keg Smash sits so hard. We're going to be wanting to hit that anyway, and you're wasting chi at that point and a talent slot. The next things, I'm kind of looking at how they're going to change stagger. I have full-heartedly believe that they will change it, maybe even change our mastery to go along with this, because as of right now, it lets us do really ridiculous things with some mechanics. Malkrok's Blood Rage is a beautiful example of this, but any other like big physical hits like Execute and Impale from Madness of Deathwing, if you remember those kinds of things, I feel like monks have the ability to really cheese those, and it's going to be something they're going to look at with encounter designs and think, do we really want this to work that way, and should we look at fixing this? Especially when we got into the higher levels of gearing, when we were looking at like you could hit 60% mastery and very easy, or 60%, I'm sorry, total stagger easily raid buffed, and you're taking so little damage, and you're able to do things like Solo Tank Thok, which from memory, unless you vastly overgear it, even on heroic, paladins and monks currently are really good at it, and the other tanking classes kind of fall on their face when you do that sort of thing. So I'll be looking definitely for those, just kind of see where that goes. And then my last little wish list thing is, because we have so much shuffle uptime, it kind of feels boring always hitting Blackout Kick, and I feel like Breath of Fire maybe be a little bit neglected. And that's partially the reason is you don't get the full damage of it, so the chi ends up being partially wasted, especially in single target, but on bosses in particular, because the Dizzying Haze debuff does not apply to them, so they don't get the dot in the end. I would really like to see this become our DPS option if we don't want to worry about our shuffle, because I have a minute shuffle uptime. It's not going down anytime soon. I'd like to convert that more from defensive to offensive. I think that would be a really great way to do it, because it's such an iconic move. I'm kind of surprised Dizzying Haze didn't get kind of wrapped in with our weakened blows debuff. Like that is our weakened blows, so that we can still do it. Because as of right now, you can generally do it on ads, but not even every kind of ads. Like you look here for Siegecrafter, the Shredders, they do not get the Dizzying Haze debuff, so we can't use Breath of Fire, and it really sucks to not have that kind of DPS option, considering when you need Tank Burst. Again, the Shredders were one of the weaker classes for that, versus like Paladins and Warriors who have those offensive cooldowns or those way to convert it more from defensive to damaging abilities or whatnot. I would really, really like to see something like that implemented for the Monk class, and I think it would make us an even more well-rounded class without really adding the button bloat. And gosh, I love Breath of Fire. It's just sad it's so useless right now, and the only people I really see using it are new Brewmasters, and it's a trap for them at that point. But that's it for me this week, guys. I will once again post a video. Next week will be Demon Hunters. We'll be discussing some of our defensive skills and how they're used, as well as their make sure you're using properly without going out of discipline and whatnot. Look forward to that. Hopefully beta soon. Can't wait. The female models for humans looked awesome. I can't wait to see even more from them. But until the next time, guys, have a wonderful one. Stay warm. It's frolicking cold out there, and at least for here where I'm at in Pittsburgh, roads are really icy. Have a wonderful day, guys.